Well, hello, hello. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Yeah, sometimes you just gotta lurk and catch up when you can, so that's just how it goes. Give me one sec. My dad asked me to print something for him. So, I'm going to do that really quickly. Don't go anywhere. Fortunately. So, let's see. Here we go. It's printing. So, glad you guys are here. Thanks for being here. It's just started pouring rain over here, so it's kind of a good day, good rainy day to read a book. So I'm going to be reading. This is book 4 in the Enola Holmes mystery series, for those of you who may not be watching these videos in order. But you should, because you'll miss out. You won't understand anything that's going on. But this is an Enola Holmes mystery, The Case of the Peculiar Pink Fan. This book is brought to you by the Westport Public Library in Westport, Connecticut. This book has been withdrawn from their collection, so thank you, Westport, for supplying this library book. All of the books that I have bought for in this series are old library book copies, and the reason for that is because all of these books have been reprinted with new covers. So I wanted to have the original covers, and it's kind of hard to find. They're really expensive new, or at least some of the ones that I found were really expensive new. So I wanted to have, the original books. So a lot of them have been found them on eBay, been withdrawn. So yeah. It probably will be coming your way, Tori. Although the radar kind of looked like it was moving kind of across Charleston, but we will see. So, sorry, let me close some of these windows out. I've just got so much being bombarded by stuff. So, alrighty. So, thank you guys for being here, for catching up. We are on chapter 6. I'm hopefully going to read, let's see, I think this book has an extra chapter. Most of the books, the last books we've read were 17 chapters. I think this one has 18 with an epilogue, and the others have been 17 with an epilogue. So, yep, 18 with an epilogue. So I'm hoping to get through chapter 12 today. So 6 through 12, hopefully, is the goal for today. Give me one sec, guys. My nose is dripping. So, one moment, please. Sorry, guys. I didn't want to be sniffling through this whole stream. That would be annoying. Also, because of the weather, if there's any difficulty with streaming, the quality of the stream, or if I cut out or something, please let me know. You guys are my monitors. You're my quality control for this. So, I'll be careful in this storm. I'm not running around in the lightning or anything. I don't even think it's lightning, actually. Haven't heard any thunder. Alright. Thanks. I like your little, oh, it's so cute. I've never seen that emoji before. Or, the little emote before. That is adorable. That just made my whole day. Oh gosh, okay. Alright. Chapter the 6th. I had to find her. Had to find Lady Cecily and rescue her from such a dreadful and unjust fate. But how? Enola, calm yourself. think. That voice from within, it was as if my mother spoke to me, and for a moment Mum's face filled my mind. A comforting memory, but with it came a discomfiting thought. Thought. I had been putting off the task of finding Mum. Why? Did I really not wish to see her? What sort of daughter was I? But then again, it was Mum who had first run away, not I. Yet I hadn't forgiven her? Blast everything! Confound questions I could not answer. No, did not wish to answer. Mentally thrusting them to the side, I sat down, picked up a pencil and paper again, and told myself that, being in such dire straits, Lady Cecily came foremost, then Mum. Then, a distant third, the army general's leg bone, which, after all, he no longer needed for any practical purpose. Regarding Lady Cecily, what concerning her difficulty did I know surely? Next to nothing. Very well, what could I surmise? I wrote. Her mother is in seclusion. I cannot imagine Lady Theodora favoring forced marriage. Lady Cecily has been taken away from her mother. Probably Sir Eustace's idea. Which made sense. What to do with an unconventional, politically opinionated, distressingly left-handed daughter who has been scandalously kidnapped and will therefore be considered spoilt goods upon the marriage market? Why bypass the unusual coming out by arranging some private disposal of the girl, probably by financial inducement? It appeared that the two dragons with whom I had seen Lady Cecily had charge of her for the time being. My task was now to identify and locate them. I wrote. Her chaperones, proud and richly clothed, seemed to be of noble blood. The chaperones seemed to wield familial authority over her. They dressed her in a greenish yellow. Might they be of aesthetic taste? Cecily and her entourage took a cab number blank. She most likely got the fan attending a pink tea, the Viscountess of Inglethorpe's pink tea. All in all, not very helpful. Although I could not remember the number of the cab, still I decided I could be moderately proud of myself for having remembered the name of the Viscountess. Indeed, it was my only clue. If any of the society papers might perhaps have run a little piece about her pink tea party and, supposing that the chaperones had attended along with Lady Cecily. If I could find an account that listed the names of the guests. But as my eyes turned towards the pile of rubbish I would have to read, I groaned aloud. Even if I found what I was looking for, then it would be necessary for me somehow to sort through the guests in order to find Lady Cecily's ogresses in waiting. Or even worse, what if I scanned the confounded papers for hours and hours, and, after all, the Viscountess's blasted tea party were not even in there? A Viscountess was not, after all, the social equal of a duke's wife, or even an earl's. What if no society reporter had bothered to... An idea caught hold with such force that my breath snagged in my throat. I let it stay there for a moment as I considered. Then, breathing out, I smiled. While I had no actual knowledge of what a society reporter might be like, I could imagine. A female with more education than means, a genteel miss rather like a governess, obliged to make a living until she found a man to take care of her. Her clothing might be plain, even thread-worn, but never lacking in taste. An object of kindness and condescension. In great haste I began to hunt up my very proper all-purpose brown tweed suit, because I had skipped luncheon, there would still be time today. An hour or so later, the aforementioned well-worn suit, neatly gloved and hiding beneath a brown hat's veil, with a stenographer's notebook and a bundle of pencils in hand, I presented myself at the door of the Viscount of Inglethorpe's city residence. To the oversized tin soldier of a butler, who eventually answered my knock, I said, I am from the Women's Gazette. I had checked many back issues of this much-admired publication, found no mention of anything Inglethorpe, and found myself to be treading on fairly safe ground as I went on. They have sent me to see whether I might do a feature on the Viscountess's pink tea. A bit late, aren't you? Rumbled the butler. That was over a week ago. When in doubt, say nothing. I replied only with a meek smile. His brows drew together. Don't you have a card? I'm new, I improvised. They haven't printed me one yet. Oh, so that's the way it is. They send out a novice a week late. I did not mind the resentment in his tone, for it showed that I had guessed rightly. The Viscountess of Inglethorpe quite wanted to be included in the society papers with the same frequency and scope as, for instance, a duchess. The Viscountess felt herself much neglected in the ladies' press, and her household naturally shared this sentiment. I repressed a smile, feeling sure now that I would be admitted. Such vanity could not turn me away. Indeed, even as the butler betook himself upstairs to consult with Lady Inglethorpe, already the housekeeper, an unexpectedly pleasant woman named Dawson, was showing me to the morning room where the tea had taken place. We've left it just so, she was saying, except for the flowers, of course, until the room is needed for something else, for my lady took great pains over the effect and likes to admire it. Admire was perhaps not the word I would have used, for I felt as if I had stepped into a cow's udder. Never before had I entertained any prejudice against the color pink, but I began to loathe it in that moment as I stood beneath pink-draped windows with pink lambrequins, tables swaddled in pink, walls recollecting my guise, and also in order to hide my face in case it showed a touch of nausea. I flipped open a notebook and began feverishly to take notes. Pink grosgrain ribbons swags on dado and pictures, pink net billowing down from the ceiling, pink Japanese lanterns dangling from pink crocheted strings. We served coconut cakes iced pink and white, and we put pink ices shaped like cupids and swans on the tables. Her ladyship wore a pink tea frock that had come all the way from France, and us servants had pink caps and pink aprons made special for the occasion. Oh, with the pink candles and all, it was like a pink fairyland in here. Clenching my teeth against my heartfelt retort, scribbling, I muttered, "Flowers? Oh, the most lovely masses of pink cabbage roses, and for the gentlemen's buttonholes, pinks, only they were white. The flowers might be any color, but they are called pinks, you know." "Yes, I see," I forced a smile. How witty. Her ladyship's idea, and for favors there were pink paper fans for the ladies and pink paper top hats for the gentlemen. Hollowly, I responded, "How very amusing." Yes, great fun they had with them. Finally, a chance at the information I wanted. And the guests were? "Jacobs has gone to ask the Viscountess whether he might give you a copy of the guest to you. Shall we go see whether he has come down?" "Please." I am sure my tone sounded a bit too fervid, being in that room made me feel as if I had gorged upon sugar plums. I drew a deep and thankful breath as we walked back to the more normally embellished hallway of the mansion. But as we passed the drawing-room door, which stood open, I jolted to an abrupt halt, staring. "Splendid, isn't it?" the housekeeper remarked when she realized what had distracted my attention. At the far end of the formal room, in the place of honor over the mantel of the hearth, hung a large, gold-framed oil portrait of a lady elegantly bestowed upon a fainting sofa, a head-to-toe and nearly life-sized rendition of her carelessly holding a white Persian cat upon the most elaborate crimson-figured silk gown I had ever imagined or seen. Let me remark as an aside that the idea of keeping a house cat in a mansion full of expensive china has always struck me as absurd, but it seems that the richer one is, the more one must show off such idiotic behavior as entertaining one's Waterford crystal, or clutching to one's bosom a creature guaranteed to rub white fur all over one's sable rouge. However, it was not any of these considerations, nor yet the remarkably in full fig costume of the woman in the portrait that stopped my steps. Rather, it was the dainty features of her fleshy face. "That's my mistress, of course," the housekeeper was saying. "The Viscountess. One of the matrons whom I had seen in the ladies' lavatory." I had scarcely time to realize the peril in which I had placed myself before the butler's voice sounded behind me. "Lady Otelia Thorofinch, Viscountess of Inglethorpe, wishes to see you in her private sitting-room." That's the end of the 6th chapter. Just gonna catch up on your chattings. Grello. I think it is Grello. That is so true, though. It works. If you're judged negatively, just throw out the response, "It's my first day," regardless of all your experience. It does work. It does. I'm not a fan of the color pink. I do not like it. Yes, that's exactly what I would say. Good job, Tara. That's exactly what I would say. Thank you, thank you. Sorry, my family's being noisy. They sound like they're up to something. Yes, you did good, Tara. You did good. Eavesdropping. Alright. Pressing on. Chapter the 7th. Oh, the The Viscountess herself. Oh my. I felt an almost insurmountable urge to flee, as if somehow she knew, which of course she couldn't possibly. But what if she recognized me? And what if she then realized that I was not from the Women's Gazette at all, but was poking my rather pronounced nose into her affairs? What if she suspected I was in receipt of a peculiar pink fan? All these frightened thoughts cried out in my mind even before I turned to follow the butler upstairs. At times such as these, it is a very good thing that my father had been a logician, and I had educated myself with his books, as follows. Premise. Viscountess Inglethorpe and I occupied the parlor of the ladies' lavatory at the same time. Premise. She will recognize me. Conclusion. Inconclusive. Weak premise. She noticed me and recognizes me. Premise. She will realize I am not a reporter from the Women's Gazette. Conclusion. Not valid, as such a reporter might very well use the ladies' lavatory. However, just as these calming, rational thoughts began to take hold, also, just as I achieved the top of the stairway, there was a bang as the heavy front door whammed open and a man's voice roared, "Ha ha!" I jumped and squeaked like a snared rabbit, for it was the voice of the exceedingly inhospitable man with the mastiff and the skunk fence. The sunk fence. But it couldn't be. My logical mind attempted once more to intercede. What possible reason? Ha ha! Here we are! The butler, who in the expressionless way of butlers seemed as startled as I, said, "Excuse me just a moment, miss," and went downstairs again to see what was what, leaving me peering over the railing. "File on in! Ha ha! Gawk all you please, ragamuffins!" Oh, my evil stars! I could see now it was the same burly man who had threatened to leave me rotting in his midnight ditch. Progressing into the entry hall, resplendent in ascot, paddock jacket, charcoal breeches, and cream-colored gaiters, with his pugnacious face straining to maintain a smirk that was probably intended to be a smile, he was followed by a most unlikely company. Orphans, filing in 2 by 2. Little girls in the traditionally hideous brown gingham pinafores, with their hair cropped so short, for the prevention of lice, that they scarcely looked female despite their ruffled caps. The butler approached the ha-ha man and bowed gravely, murmuring something. "Just giving the little beggars a treat, ha-ha," the man roared. From my refuge behind the stair railings I watched in fascination as his balding forehead turned tomato red. Anything wrong with that? The butler's deferential manner had apparently concealed some question of the man's presence under the circumstances. "Look, but don't touch," admonished a starchy middle-aged female at the end of the brown gingham line, a matron of the orphanage. I knew the instant I saw her, not merely because of her plain brown dress and her even more severe demeanor, but because she wore, like all such matrons, the most outlandish and unmistakable hat, white cotton starched in the shape of an inverted tulip, with ruffles around its edge. The minute I had a chance I must draw a picture of the orphanage matron like a plain brown tower with a bulbous white beacon on top. "Shall I notify the Viscountess?" the butler was asking, or not asking really, warning. "No need, just showing the darlings what they have to look forward to, ha-ha. If they go to service in my house, you know, ha-ha." With which outrageous statement, for quite plainly from the butler's manner, this was not his house, the smirking and glowering mastiff-like man bellowed, "This way, urchins," and strode onward. Huddled shoulder to shoulder, clutching each other's hands with their faces displaying the terror I felt, the orphans followed more slowly. From behind, the matron herded them as they all disappeared from my view beneath the stairway from which I watched. Even though I knew that the ha-ha man had not seen me, and would not have recognized me in any event, even so, my heart thumped, and while ladies never sweat or even perspire, certainly I felt my personage pass into the condition known as all-in-all glow. The butler returned upstairs, his white face so eloquently blank that I dared not ask him who the ha-ha man was. Indeed, I dared not speak. With difficulty I made myself let go of the stair railing to which I had been clinging. In icy silence the butler showed me to a door. The journalistic personage of which I informed you. My lady," he announced me as he opened it. He intended, it seemed, to allow his mistress to remain ignorant of the invasion downstairs, at least for the moment and in my dubious presence. "Yes, quite." As the Viscountess brusquely gestured for me to enter, she scarcely looked at me. Thank goodness. After a moment I was able to take a deep breath and regain some measure of calm. Her ladyship did not, of course, invite me to be seated. A common news reporter would not be staying long. Nor did she give me a chance to ask her any questions. She quite took charge. "I want you to see what I wore for the pink tea." On cue, a maid-in-waiting emerged from a walk-in closet, carrying a fabric confection of pink. "That is a Worth gown," the Viscountess declared, and she began to read aloud from a salon program. This exquisite tea gown is fashioned from pink chine pompadour taffeta with a graceful gorget pleating, trimmed around the... Write it down. I want you to get it all just as I say. Obediently I scribbled, meanwhile aware that the jade damask at-home day dress the Viscountess wore might be described every bit as elaborately. Indeed, it seemed to me that one might almost be presented to the Queen in it. It could not have been more apparent to me that this woman had aspirations above her station. Trimmed around the neckline with puffed white tulle over scallops of pearl-studded sateen, while a double strand of rare pink pearls begins at the bust and drapes to the right side of the skirt, fastened there with a clasp of pink gold inspired by Michelangelo's Sibyls of the Sistine Chapel. Have you got all that? Yes, my lady, I lied. And might I inquire the names of those who attended, my lady? Now that I knew who the Viscountess was, I wanted to find out who had been the other dragoness dowager accompanying her with Lady Cecily on the occasion when I had first encountered them. I hoped the other ogress's identity might be disclosed by the pink tea guest list. Oh, yes, I have the list here. There was the Countess of Woodcroft, of course. She said this in such a by-the-by manner that I knew the Countess was her prize catch for the event. Lady Dinah Woodcroft, Count Thaddeus was unfortunately unable to attend, and then there were the 3 daughters of the Earl of Throsselbine, the Honourable Mrs. Ermintrude, and Erminine Crow, escorted by... This went on until I began to despair of ever sorting it out. And the Baroness Merganser, Lady Aquila Merganser. She is my sister, you know. Oh, really? My interest was not feigned. Did the sister by any chance look almost exactly like her? Was Lady Aquila Merganser the one... Indeed, Aquila married rather beneath her station, I fear. Pompous nonsense, for, practically speaking, a baron is no better or worse a creature than a viscount. Her husband did not attend, but she brought along her son, Bramwell, and his fiancée, the Honourable Cecily Alastair. I say her name wrong every time. The Honourable Cecily Alastair. Yes! Oh, yes! As one ogress was the Viscountess, almost certainly the other ogress had to be her sister Aquila, who had a son named Bramwell, who intended to marry the unfortunate Lady Cecily. Finding it very difficult to hide my excitement as I scrawled the names, I babbled. A very attractive young lady, I am sure. She could be if she would trouble herself. Quite spoilt, and rather a child, I fear. But then, abruptly, as if my interest in Lady Cecily caused her to close the door on a further discourse, Lady Ottilia turned her back, her derriere, I noticed, showing the effect of too much horseback riding on a side saddle, being visibly asymmetrical, the right part higher than the left. With difficulty I suppressed a smile. The Viscountess gestured dismissal. That is all. Yes, my lady. One must play one's part. I actually bobbed a sort of curtsy. Thank you, my lady. The butler waited to show me out, his demeanour now so upright as to be nearly martial. I wondered whether the apparent uninvited parade of orphans had yet left the premises, but I did not dare mention them, for I had one request to make. Once safely down the stairs, I asked whether I might speak with the housekeeper Dawson again. Just for a moment, to thank her for her helpfulness, I toadied. With lofty indifference, the butler assented. A few moments later, the friendly Dawson sat down in the servants' lounge with me. She was pleased to go over the Pink Tea's guest list with me in much greater detail than her mistress had done. I will spare the gentle reader any account of the gossip that necessarily preceded what I wanted to know. I incurred several minutes of confidences before I felt it safe to display curiosity regarding Viscountess Ottilia's and her sister Lady Aquila. Oh, yes, declared the good Dawson. As like as 2 peas in a pod they are. Eureka, I thought. Just as I had surmised, it must have been Baroness Aquila I had seen with the Viscountess Ottilia and Lady Cecily in the ladies' lavatory. My poor left-handed baby. I suppressed an urge to shudder for her. My poor left-handed lady. I suppressed an urge to shudder for her, as Bramwell Merganser, the groom-to-be, was Aquila's son. Then unless I could thwart her scheme, that charming woman would become poor Cecily's mother-in-law. Although yearning to know more of the proposed wedding, I needed to proceed carefully with Dawson so as not to arouse suspicion. Even the most garrulous. I'm going to spell it for you guys. Lost my spot. Hold on. These are your SAT words for the day. Even the most garrulous servant retains loyalty to her mistress. I made myself sit back in my chair across the tea-table from her. Have they many children? I asked, as this was the question that would most naturally arise next concerning the sisters Otelia and Aquila. The propagation of numerous children, although a nuisance among the lower classes, was considered quite a virtue among the gentry, exemplified by Queen Victoria herself, who had produced 9. Sadly, my lady the Viscountess has no living progeny, said Dawson with sympathy, yet at the same time a certain relish that the tragedy of child mortality, due to spotted fever and the like, was not confined to the lower classes. And of Baroness Aquila's 5, only Bramwell has survived to adulthood. She has made rather a mama's boy of him, I fear, added Dawson pensively as she refilled our teacups. Outwardly, I hope I remained bland, but inwardly I bayed and panted, a hound hot on the scent. Indeed, how old is he? Nearly 30, and still living at home, doing nothing on his own, and he appears to be likely to spend the rest of his life that way, for all that he's soon to be married. Yes, so I see. Very natural, my curiosity, very innocent. This Lady Cecily Alastair, who is she? A cousin. Her father, Eustace Alastair, is Lady Aquila's brother, and Lady Otelia's, of course. Oh dear, how odious. Yet there was nothing scandalous in the arrangement, for cousins marrying cousins is common practice among blue bloods, to keep property in the family, with the unintentional effect, according to Malthus, that each generation grows uglier than the last. And marrying his daughter to his sister's son was exactly the sort of thing Sir Eustace would do. I remembered how his concern had been all for hushing up scandal rather than for his daughter's safety, when Cecily had been kidnapped. After her return, I felt sure he had regarded her not as a victim but as a disgrace. He had no concern for her sensibilities. In order to avoid any further embarrassment to himself, therefore, he had arranged to marry her off privately, rather than have her presented at court. I wondered how much dowry he had paid to the Mergansers. Dawson awaited my response. A good match, I ventured. Yes, indeed, a very good match it is. All this time I had put off a fascinating but indelicate question. I wanted to know who the ha-ha man was, a gentleman, by his dress, perhaps even titled, with some connection to this household. Therefore, even though I knew otherwise, I asked, was it Sir Eustace by any chance who so kindly escorted the orphans? But I had reached the limits of Dawson's willingness to divulge. She responded only with gentle distress. No, indeed, that was not Sir Eustace, and as for bringing those dreadfully common children into this house unannounced. But it's not my place to say more. You'll excuse me, I'm sure. And that's the end of chapter 7. Get to the bottom of it. Oh my gosh, Tara. That would be pretty great. The Peculiar Pink fan. Yeah, that's exactly how it's spelled, too. It's like H-A, but with a hyphen in between the two. The 3 daughters of the Earl, Larry, Curly, and Moe. Yep. There you go. Thank you for clapping. The Ha-Ha Man does sound like a stupid horror movie, like The Bye-Bye Man. That's such a dumb title. Like, I never saw that movie. I don't really watch horror movies, but I saw the title and I was like, why would you name something like this? It's so, like, ludicrous. Like, I feel like no one would take it seriously. But anyways, they don't ask me when they name movies, so, you know, what can I say? Alrighty. We will be pressing onward. Excuse me. Chapter the 8th. I returned to Dr. Ragaston's office in an uncertain frame of mind. Poor Cecily. Poor high-minded, artistic, free-spirited girl. I knew how she felt as the whole world, seemingly, attempted to break that spirit. I knew what it was like to be a young female utterly at the mercy of relatives and my legal guardians, forced into obedience. Only my mother's cleverness had saved me. How was I to save Lady Cecily? After lighting the gas lamps, I made immediately for the bookshelves and seized upon Boyle's, one's indispensable guide to the aristocracy. Having had no luncheon made me cross and stubborn, so much so that I refused to go home for dinner. Instead, I sat down at once to look up Inglethorpe and Merganser, then proceeded onward to other references until I eventually pieced together a sequence of events. The father of Eustace, Aquila, and Ottilia, I discovered, had been the merest baronet, Sir Dorian Alastair, B.T. I don't know what B.T. It's like an abbreviation at the end of his name. Not a lord, not even a member of the peerage. Moreover, his means had been in no way equal to his aspirations. However, he and his wife had put on a good show when it came time to launch their 2 daughters into society, and both Ottilia and Aquila apparently had possessed sufficient beauty and charm, although I found this hard to imagine, to marry up. Eustace also had done very well by marrying Lady Theodora. Boyles took me no farther, but from my personal knowledge, having met Lady Theodora, apparently the heavens were to be blessed that Sir Eustace's children took after their mother, not their father. I knew that Lady Cecily vehemently disagreed with her father's views of charity. He gave none. Society, heights to be climbed, and a woman's place, obey. I wondered how much Lady Cecily's cousin, whom she was being forced to marry, resembled her father. How very unfair that such an innocent, intelligent, sensitive girl, Cecily would have given her shoes to a beggar, that such a young lady should have been first cursed with Sir Eustace for a father, then kidnapped by a conniving villain, and now locked in a room and starved. Where? Boyles gave me Baron Merganser's London address, and it seemed sensible to start looking there. At once. One cannot always and forever be changing clothes, especially if one were to have a look at the Merganser residence while there was still some daylight. The brown tweed suit would do, I told myself firmly. It was dark enough, as were my grey stockings and brown boots. The only thing likely to give me away in the night was my white collar, which I could remove when it was time. Thinking along these lines, I delayed only to snatch up several potentially useful items, jamming them into a carpet bag. Swinging this, I hailed a cab, a four-wheeler, to Oakley Street, I told the driver, and then just drive slowly. While sighing over the fee the man named, I reminded myself that in his vehicle I could see without being seen. A very good thing, as I'm sure my jaw dropped to my collar ruffle when I sighted the house. Could I have mistaken the address? No, the numbers were quite clearly displayed on the gate-post of the spiked, wrought-iron fence which surrounded an ivy-shrouded mansion amid copper beeches, their spreading limbs and odd russet leaves shading the grounds. Yes, there had been beeches, but could I be confused in my recollection? I certainly hoped so. A couple of blocks farther on, signaling the driver to stop, I told him to turn around and drive slowly back again, so that I could take another look. Which, no happier than the first, confirmed what I wished not to be the case. Baron Merganser's London home, an exceedingly ugly, pointed Gothic edifice of steeply gabled grey stone, very likely complete with gargoyles, was the self-same place at which, as a midden-picker, I had encountered a large and unpleasant man, a quite ferocious mastiff, and most peculiar, a sunk fence. I now realized who that ha-ha man must be, having seen him today, expensively dressed, although a most incongruously consorting with orphans, a circumstance which failed to lessen my fear of him, in a location that could hardly be coincidental. Turning matters over in my mind, I felt dreadfully weary, entertaining a strong desire to go home and rest. Indeed, I had the cab drive me towards Covent Garden, where at a busy corner I dismissed it. From a street vendor I purchased some biscuits and lemonade, forcing myself to eat and drink as I considered what I might do next. Then, after a bit of wandering, I found a butcher's stall, where I bought a large soup bone with plenty of tasty-looking meat and gristle on it. This, I thought, as I stowed it, well wrapped in brown paper, in my now bulging carpet-bag, would distract the mastiff while I climbed the fence. As for crossing the ha-ha, well, I had learned my lesson a few weeks prior when I had found myself climbing the wall of the most precipitous house, nearly falling half a dozen times before I had made my way to the rooftop, which had proved to be no less treacherous, plummeting me through glass. But I digress. My point is that, after surviving this fiasco with nothing worse than a few cuts, I had purchased a goodly length of strong rope and promised myself that never again would I venture into any irregular situation without it. Indeed, its tidy coils nestled beneath the soup bone in my carpet bag. With the rope, I should be able to improvise some way to achieve the other side of the ha-ha. After which, I tried to plan as I walked to the nearest underground station and waited upon the platform for the train that was to take me back towards my fateful destination. After which, all I needed to do was to get in the house, evade detection, find Lady Cecily, release her from captivity, and bring her away with me. Heaven help me. Quite a bit later, when it seemed reasonable to think that folk were abed, after the house windows had gone dim and the streets quiet except for the monotonous tread of the constable, I slipped up to a certain wrought iron fence beside the carriage house this time. There I unwrapped the soup bone from its brown paper and lobbied it into the Merganser yard through the bars, pleased to see it land just where I intended, in front of the doghouse. I expected that the mastiff would then come charging out and give a woof or two before he discovered his treat. However, the dog did not bark. Indeed, I saw no sign of him. As before, gas jets ranged around the outside of the house lit up the environs. What a reckless expenditure! And I waited several moments, expecting the dog to appear out of some shadow, but he did not. Might he be sound asleep in his lair? I mistrusted such good luck, but saw no alternative except to continue. Softly I made my way to the corner of the fence behind the carriage house, where the friendly shadows gathered thickest, and there, hanging my carpet-bag from my belt and knotting my skirt above my knees, I climbed. No stable-boy shouted as I let myself down the fence's inner side. No watchdog barked. No alarm of any kind sounded. Rather than soothing my apprehensions, however, the silence worried me. It seemed too lucky, as if I might be entering a trap. Yet I felt there was no choice but to go on, and next I had to find a way across the sunk fence. Before moving out of the shadows, I got down close to the ground, because I knew, from my childhood experience of country life, that this was what poachers did in order to make themselves less likely to be seen when venturing across open expanses of forbidden land. Crawling, therefore, I crept towards the edge of the ditch, alert in every sense for any disturbance in the night. Even my skin and the roots of my hair seemed to hearken. I heard the distant rumble of wheels and clop of hooves on cobbles, the equally distant creak of some privy door swinging on its hinges, and high overhead, beech leaves rustling in a light breeze, nothing more. Until a voice spoke from somewhere quite nearby, shocking me rigid. In a pent whisper it said, "Confound the entire wretched business." A man's voice. "I shall be a laughing-stock," he whispered on with the fervor of one who vocalizes merely to rid himself of unruly emotion. How could I fail to foresee a device so childishly simple? He spoke, I realized, from the depths of the ha-ha. His was a voice I had heard before. Somehow my body recognized it in advance of my mind, which still lacked proper function due to shock and terror, but my skin and my limbs felt no fear, quite the opposite. They hurried me forward, still crawling until I could look over the edge into the ditch. 10 feet from me, at the bottom of that dark abyss, the midnight mutterer had lit a match in order to study his predicament. I saw him clearly. He wore black clothing, a black cap, and he had darkened his face with soot, but I knew him readily enough. My brother Sherlock. It's the end of chapter 8. That's what I would think, that BT is a baronet. Biscuit lemonade. I think it's a biscuit and a lemonade. Separate. So you can eat one and drink the other. Thank you. Thank you for clapping. Appreciate it. So, I'm just gonna keep on keeping on. I'm making pretty good time, I think. Yeah, making pretty good time. Some of these chapters are shorter than, like, chapters in the other books. So, Chapter the 9th. My emotions might as well have been a stampede of wild horses, they knocked me so witless. Yet, I must admit, one of my numerous feelings ran clearly and triumphantly in the fore, sheerest glee. How the mighty had fallen! The match flame had traveled down the stick until it burnt Sherlock's fingers. Dropping his light, he said something unrepeatable, and from the darkness above his head I told him, "Shame on you." Even as the match went out, I saw him startle in a most satisfactory manner. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice reaching skyward. "Shush," I whispered, glee running away and terror taking its place. "You'll rouse the mastiff." "Who is it?" His tone softened, yet sharpened. "Bridget?" Do I sound like an Irishwoman? My wits had begun to rally and mental functions to take hold. "What have you done with the mastiff?" "Fed it chopped beef a la bromide." He lit another match and held it high, trying to see me, yet he did not rise to his feet. I saw that he had taken his right boot off, and his foot stuck out before him, quite swollen, within its stocking, either sprained or broken. Instantly, overrun by concern, I forgot all else. "You're hurt!" At the same time he yelped, "Enola?" Apparently he recognized, if not my shadowy face, then my unfortunately distinctive voice. "Do hush! I'll get you out!" Already unfastening the carpet bag from my waist, I changed my mind and reached into my bosom first. Sherlock demanded, "Enola, what in heaven's name? You pop up everywhere! What? One might well say the same thing of you and Mycroft, always and forever in my way. Here." I dropped a generous length of bandaging in his lap. "Wrap your foot in that. Wait." I let a little flask of brandy fall on top of the bandaging. "Drink some for the pain, then bandage your ankle as tightly as you can. Here are scissors." "No, thank you, my penknife will serve. I need nothing more, I assure you." His light had once again gone out, and I could not see his face, but I heard a tremor of laughter, and, dare I say it, a kind of warmth in his voice. "Unless perhaps you have a ladder in your pocket." "Indeed I do. Or at least I had a rope in my carpet-bag in order to rescue. Good heavens, whom should I attempt to save first, my brother or the unfortunate Cecily?" I longed to linger with Sherlock, for I felt that given even a brief acquaintance, I could confide in him as I never could in Mycroft. I wanted to explain to Sherlock why I had run away, because I could not be corseted, either literally or figuratively, into any conventional feminine mold. And I wanted to assure him of my regard, and most especially I wanted to ask him whether he had found any communication from Mum to me when he had gone back to search her rooms at Ferndale. Never again might I have such an opportunity for conversation with my brother, unafraid that he might seize me. Yet I could have wept with vexation, for there was no time, not while Lady Cecily remained in such horrifying difficulties. Thrusting all other thoughts aside, therefore, I demanded, "Lady Theodora hired you?" Sherlock blurted, "How on earth do you know of this matter?" His unguarded reply confirmed my hope. Lady Theodora opposed the forced marriage of her daughter. "I knew it," I cried. "I knew she would never, no such loving mother would ever—" But a fearsome thought struck me. "How was she able to approach you?" "You seem to know all about it," Sherlock grumbled from the depths of the ha-ha, his breath seething between his teeth as he yanked at the bandaging binding his hurt foot. "What do you think?" "I think Sir Eustace has her confined to her chambers. How did she manage—" "Draw your own conclusions." "Doing so, one must conclude that Sir Eustace has separated mother and daughter, imprisoning the latter here, judging by your presence." "And yours?" "Was something arranged? Is Lady Cecily expecting your visit tonight?" Crankily he shot back. "Is she expecting yours?" I pressed my lips together, puffing with exasperation. "Just tell me, was something arranged?" Silence for a moment. Then, "No," he admitted. "I found no way to communicate with her." "Enola—" "But you're sure she's held here?" "No secret of that. They take her out in the landau for a daily airing." "Odd," I murmured. "Yes, I also think it odd that they should risk her escape for the sake of show, but perhaps a restraint of some sort, hidden beneath her clothing, binds her to the seat." "Perhaps, but why on earth does she not scream for help?" Sherlock retorted, "Good heavens, Enola, the unfortunate girl is a baronet's daughter, not such a hoyden as you." Hoyden. Hoyden. Hoyden? Was that what he called a free-thinking, independent female? As for Cecily, if he thought her meek and mannerly, he did not know her as well as I did. "My dear brother, I will allow your insult and your ignorance to pass," I told him pleasantly. "As you are here to free Lady Cecily, evidently, I suggest we join forces, if you will promise me upon your honor not to attempt any infringement upon my liberty." "Join? Are you out of your minuscule mind?" Stung, I shot back. "Am I the one in the ditch with a lamed foot?" I fear my tone rather inflamed him. "Whatever my mischance, your place is not here. Go home, girl, where you belong." A comment quite unworthy of him, I thought, and not deserving of a reply. Giving none, I turned my attention to opening my carpet bag. For the matter of that, Enola, do you have a home? He continued in heightened tones. Where are you living all this time, and how? Ignoring him, I extracted the rope from the carpet bag while I mentally enumerated the latter's remaining contents: curling irons to drive into the ground were it necessary to fasten the rope to something, a cast iron meat tenderizer by way of a club, a truncated croquet mallet, and some other tools. I hefted the bag to be sure. Yes, weight enough. Does any respectable and responsible older person have a care for you? Closing the carpet bag, I tied one end of the rope firmly to its handle. The rest of the rope I laid out upon the ground until I was sure I had provided sufficient slack, and then I tucked a loop of its remaining length into my belt in such a manner that I would not lose it, yet could yank it free at a moment's notice. If not, then you cannot possibly be safe. Any female dwelling alone is a magnet for crime. Turning my back on him, I rose, and with the rope trailing behind me like a tail, 2 tails actually, the one to the carpet bag and the other loose end, I strode to the nearest tree, embraced its trunk, and began to make my way upward. I strained my every nerve and fiber in order to do so. The beech is the most difficult of all trees to climb, for the trunk is straight and exceedingly tall, with smooth silver bark as glossy as satin. Only the utmost necessity, and I admit a great deal of petty pride, I would show the great Sherlock Holmes who needed to have care for whom. Only extremity drove me to attempt my ascent. Gritting my teeth, wasting no breath on naughty words that came to mind, I crept upward, clinging, from time to time slipping back despite my best efforts, fervently wishing that the blood of Darwin's monkeys ran a bit stronger in my veins, as I grappled and clawed with hands rubbed raw, tried to grip with the soles of my boots. If only I could grip with my feet like a chimpanzee. Still I persevered, every portion of my personage stinging with exertion, until I attained a height of perhaps 20 feet above the ground, sufficient so that I could look down on the ditch, and although I could not see into it, I felt sure that my brother, looking up, could see me. And just as I triumphantly thought this, my head struck something. Metal. What in the name of the devil? Diabolical indeed, I discovered as I looked up to study the obstacle. Just below the point where the beech trunk began to branch, someone had placed a steel collar. The sort of thing one might use to try and keep squirrels off a bird feeder, only much larger, of course. No wonder any villains in residence here felt safe allowing copper beeches to overhang their sunk fence. I could climb no farther. And I fear then I whispered something quite unforgivable, for I had hoped to gain the security of branches before I deployed the rope. Ye gods in dirty breeches, ye gods with great hopping fleas. But I refused to admit defeat. Wasting no more breath on useless commentary, gripping hard to the beech trunk with 3 of my limbs, with the 4th I took the rope from my belt and began to pull up the end attached to the carpet bag. I required the assistance of my teeth to hold the rope, each time I shifted my hand. If I should lose my grip, the consequences were barely thinkable. Meanwhile, all my limbs had begun to tremble and weaken, placing me in extreme danger. It seemed an eternity before I had it. The carpet bag, swinging within a few feet of me, I knew I could not cling to the beech trunk much longer without falling. I needed to take aim and throw it, without fail, for I might have no second chance. In a sizable bough that jutted in the proper direction, I swung my arm so that the bag described an arc in the air, and swung once again, then once more to make sure as I let go. The carpet bag, as clumsy a fowl as ever flew, blundered aloft, seemed to hang vulture-like in the air for a moment, then fell. Yes! Oh yes, thank goodness! The rope lay over the bough. Now I had only to maneuver until the carpet bag wedged quite firmly in a fork of the branch. Then at last the rope would support me. Meanwhile I felt my grip on the trunk of the tree beginning to slip. Clinging for dear life with one arm whilst I feverishly employed the other, I pulled the rope towards me, watching the carpet bag dangle at the other end. Never before in my life had I truly reached the limit of my strength, and never again do I wish to repeat the experience, quite without my permission. My limbs simply let go, and helplessly I fell. It's the end of chapter 9. Oh my gosh, Tara, you're just making this like a horror story. Fudge, only I didn't say fudge. I said the other one, the big one. F dash dash dash. Such a good movie. Christmas time. We always watch it on Black Friday. It's our Black Friday tradition. Kind of kicks off the Christmas season, you know. Alrighty. Oh, thank you for clapping. Appreciate it, guys. Chapter the 10th. I badly wanted to scream, and under the circumstances I certainly had every right to do so. However, any such Wow, I don't know how to pronounce this word at all. I'm like stuck. Ululation. That's it. Spell it for you guys. It was just so confusing to read in print. Ululation, which is like making noise, might have attracted attention of a most unwelcome sort from the house. Somehow I retained sufficient presence of mind to utter only a squeak as I plummeted. Also somehow, perhaps because my extremity of terror shot new strength into me, without taking credit for any conscious virtue in the matter, I am grateful to say that somehow I kept hold of the rope. Within a moment, a long moment it seemed, but in fact only several horrified heartbeats, almost at once that blessed lifeline broke my fall. My carpet-bag had after all caught in the beech tree, and with a gasp I found myself swinging in mid-air, convulsively clutching the rope with both hands. However, as my strength was all but gone, I slipped downward. But even whilst swinging in such a manner, one can manipulate one's arc by leaning one's personage this way or that. Doing so, in a moment I had landed with the rope still in my hands, and with the appearance of being in full control of my descent, giving barely a thump as I collapsed to the ground just where I wanted to be, near the edge of the sunk fence, but on the other side from where I had begun. "Enola, what in the name of heaven are you doing?" my brother whispered explosively. "Yes, I assure you this is possible. From the ditch." "Is it not obvious?" I panted, for how could he not see? I had crossed the ha-ha, and as soon as I had caught my breath, I would proceed to the house. "It is obvious only that our mother gave birth to an Amazon," shock vied with, I think, and hope, admiration in his voice. "Why did you not tell me you had a rope? Secure it to something quickly, then give it here so I can lift myself out of this confounded ditch." His tone, quite accustomed to being obeyed before he could snap his fingers, failed to move me. Without, again, taking credit for any conscious virtue in the act of defiance, I responded not at all simply because I had so thoroughly exhausted myself. "The rope, Enola!" "I think not," I replied blandly, my breathing somewhat more under control. "After I get back, perhaps." "What? Back from where?" "From locating, and, if at all possible, freeing the unfortunate Lady Cecily. Would you happen to know in which room she is imprisoned?" "In the most inaccessible apex of the North Tower." He meant to discourage me, I think, and realized too late, as I sat up to dust myself off and prepare for action, that he had offered me an irresistible challenge instead. "Enola, you cannot!" "I am not sure I can," I admitted, "but I certainly intend to try." "It is simply not possible." "Why? You intended to do it, before you ran afoul of the sunk fence. How can you plan to accomplish it? How did you plan to accomplish it?" "Assist me out of this damnable ditch, and perhaps I will show you." My tone quite gentle in contrast to his, I said, "Not until you give me your promise." "What?" "Promise me upon your honor you will let me be, and will make no attempt to apprehend me or constrain me." Silence. A good sign, I realized, for Sherlock Holmes would make no promise lightly, and if he gave his word, he would abide by it without fail. Indeed, if we could be friends. Deep within me commenced the most peculiar fluttering sensation, as if a butterfly had split open the chrysalis of my heart. Indeed, I felt my pulse begin to throb so hard that I could hear my own heart beating? Almost too late I realized it was not so. What I could hear, in that silence, was footsteps. Behind me and off to one side, someone walking. Someone had come out of the house, and was approaching nearer by the moment. My reaction was instantaneous, and, I admit, contrary to reason. I tossed the rope to Sherlock, hissing, "Shh! Stay down!" The rope, vertical against the tree behind it, should not be noticed in the night. My brother should escape detection. But where, pray tell, was I to hide? Instinctively I cowered, flattening myself to the ground, but what more to do I could not think. "Don't like it, I tell you," said a deep, dark voice I recognized. It was the massive man who had quite terrified a certain midden picker, and who consorted most incongruously with orphans. I haven't heard Lucifer make a sound for the past hour. Because the dog isn't barking, you roused me out of bed? The second voice, also male, sounded childishly wrought. Really, father? Don't pout at me, Bramwell. It's for your sake we're taking these precautions. Bramwell. The Baron of Merganser's son and heir. Then the big brute of a man was indeed, as I concluded, the Baron himself. With fascinated horror I watched as father and son emerged from between the beech trees. Both carried heavy walking sticks by way of weapons. The son, Bramwell, had a burly physique similar to that of his mastiff-like father, but in the younger man's case it made him resemble a toad. As did his face, what I could see of it in the gaslit night. Small wonder he had not managed to win a bride in any gentlemanly way. Father and son made it toward the mastiff's quarters, and at once the Baron roared, See! Someone's been feeding him! Dramatically, he pointed at the soup bone I had flung over the fence. Someone's poisoned him! No, they haven't poisoned your darling Lucifer. Can't you hear the brute snore? He's in bed, sleeping. Facing the mastiff's house, they stood with their backs to me, and I took the opportunity to repeat as noiselessly as possible. Retreat, as noiselessly as possible, scooting away hind end foremost, like a crustacean going under a rock, so that I could continue watching them. As I should be asleep in mine, added Bramwell pettishly. Stop being a donkey. Poison or a sleeping powder, it means the same. Someone is trying to get in. So? Someone is prying into our affairs. And what if they do? What if they pry their way right into the tower? All I will find there is a stable boy dressed as a girl. Shut your mouth. The Baron's fury froze me motionless in the shadows. The way he turned on his son, I really thought for a moment that he would strike him, but instead he growled. Not another word of that. Do you understand me? Reply. In a subdued tone, Bramwell said, Yes, father. We must arm ourselves with pistols, then search the grounds. Come along. Yes, father. Meekly Bramwell followed as the Baron strode towards the house. Even as they did so, movement from the other direction caught my eye. Swarming up the rope, hand over hand, as smartly as any sailor, Sherlock lifted himself from the ditch, crawling out upon the side away from me, towards the fence. Quite sensibly, then, having concluded from Bramwell's words, as I had, that Lady Cecily was not after all to be found in the tower, he intended to make his escape. Good. Fervidly wishing to do likewise, I stayed where I was, flat on the ground behind the nearest tree trunk, waiting for him to depart, for I knew him to be a fox, in his way as much a danger to me as the irate Baron and his unlovely son. Sherlock rose to his feet, or, rather, his uninjured foot, for the other, wrapped in the bandaging with which I had supplied him, showed all too clearly and unfortunately white in the night, and that pale, bloated L barely touched the ground. He placed hardly any weight on the foot at all. Seriously lame, he must get away as quickly as possible. Naturally, then, I expected him to limp towards the fence, at once. But instead, wobbling on one leg, he scanned the yard and gave a muted call. Enola! Confound him! Shouted and in hiding, I clenched my fists in frustrations that he would not let me alone. Yet at the same time I felt that benighted butterfly fluttering in my heart. Enola, come here! I'll not leave without you! He quite meant it, I could tell, as indeed I should have realized all along, for Sherlock Holmes was a true gentleman. That is to say, incapable of sensible behavior under such circumstances. Muttering the naughtiest words I knew, I rose to my feet, yanking knots out of my skirt. What a wretched time to feel shy. But I would not face my brother with my knees bared. Rife with the strangest emotions, I ran towards him while my mulch-rumpled brown tweed arranged itself to cover my lower limbs to the ankles. With only the sunk fence between us, I stared at Sherlock, intent on every nuance of his face. But he gave me scarcely a glance. Enola, quick! He tossed me the rope. Catching it, I stood where I was, studying him for some indication, some sign. Still he had not given me any promise, you see. Nor would he. He only stared back at me, his chiseled face like marble, something in his gaze imploring me, yet daring me to trust him, if for only this 1 hour of this one night. Confound you, Sherlock Holmes, I told him, and I took the dare. Reaching above my head to grasp the rope that hung down from the beech tree, I swung across the ha-ha to land lightly by his side. That's the end of chapter 10. I'm sorry, my intonation was a little off. I didn't know that was the end. Yes. Oh, thank you, Tara. I'm glad I got the pronunciation right. Ululates. Yeah, I don't have any commands. I don't have a bot. I don't have any fun stuff here. Hello, CJ. Welcome. Glad you're here. Okay, we have 2 more chapters. Maybe more. Depends. I've only gone an hour, so I might go a little further. But I'm going to go get a drink really quickly, so I will be right back. But I'm going to pull a Tori, and I'm going to do this so that you're not looking at my, you can't see my bedroom. So, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Thanks for clapping, guys. No, like, seriously, like, you guys just do it to be nice, but having that claps on the, like, the screen, like, showing up on my chat over there, like, really helps me when I put these on YouTube, because it helps me find the, like, the chapter breaks, because I time out the chapter breaks, so that people that watch this on YouTube, they can skip past all the boring talking in between chapters if they want to just, like, click through the chapters, kind of like an audiobook. So, no, I like having, you guys put that on there. It helps me out, like, with the editing afterwards. Am I coming through okay? As far as, like, quality goes? It stopped raining, so I would think that my, stuff was okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. So, alright. Gonna keep on keeping on. I might go past chapter 12 today if we can, who knows. If I make really good time, I might finish this book, so here we go. Aw, thanks, Tara. That's so sweet. Alrighty. Chapter the 11th. Indeed, I stood quite too close to Sherlock for comfort, and hastily stepped back. I felt heat of embarrassment rising in my face, but surely in the dark he could not see me blushing. Continuing to move quickly, as if such had been my intention from the first, I ran to the fence and began to climb, still carrying the slack end of the rope in one hand. Hobbling after me, Sherlock said, "Leave the blasted thing behind." Not answering, I took the rope in my teeth instead, for halfway up the cast-iron bars I realized how my skirt was hindering me. I needed to haul it out of my way, and why should I drop the rope? It was for Sherlock. How else was he to climb with a lamed foot? As soon as I reached the fence's spiked top, I grabbed the rope, looped it around the stout paling, and tossed the end towards my brother. Did he thank me? Heavens, no. He said, "I don't need it." "Stop where you are!" roared the Baron's voice from the direction of his Gothic manse, and almost simultaneously sounded the even louder roar of a firearm. "Stop, thieves!" The gun fired again, and I heard the bullet clang against a metal fence post somewhere nearby. Far from halting me, these blandishments spurred me over the fence at remarkable speed. Sherlock, too, scaled it with great alacrity, making excellent use of the rope he had said he didn't need. Indeed, by the time a third shot, or perhaps there were 4, it is all frightfully rapid and muddled in my memory. My brother was letting himself down the outside of the fence. One could hear the Baron and his squeaky-voiced son bellowing and running towards us. They fired once or twice more, and Sherlock fell. "No!" I hope never again to experience such horror and desolation as I did whilst running to him, thinking he was hit, hurt, bleeding, or worse, that he lay expiring. But no, he lived. Even before I reached him, I could see him struggling to rise. Seizing his arm, I hauled him to his feet. "Lean on me," I told him. Indeed, I all but carried him away, trotting. Fortunately, his weight was slight for such a tall man. "Make haste! This way!" I hurried him off through a neighboring property by a back privy path I knew from previous explorations. "Are you badly wounded?" "Only my pride. I slipped." Still such pain panted in his voice that I could scarcely believe him. "You're not shot?" "By pistols at that range? Hardly. They should have waited until they came closer." He sounded quite his superior self. Relief washed through me. Thank goodness. Goodness has nothing to do with it. Just listen to them. Fearsome curses sounded not nearly far enough behind us as we ducked through a gap in someone's fence and around the corner of an unoccupied cowshed, then through the stony shadows of a neglected creamery. Leaning on my shoulder, Sherlock hobbled badly. "Stop a moment," he whispered, panting. "Listen." He halted. I, however, moved onward until he let go of me. Then, a few steps distant from his laboured breathing, I could hear, along with the barking voices of the Baron and his son, the lilting exhortations of the Irish constable. "For the love o' mercy, it's wakin' the innocent ye are," he was saying, "whilst the guilty, they're long gone." Growl, snarl, rumble. "To be sure, shoot all you want on your own bit o' land, but ye can't be afther firin' pistols in the street." More growls and snarls. "No harm done. Look at the lovely length of rope they lift ye. Back in the house with you now. File a report in the morning. Yes, I'll be keeping an eye out for them." In silence we listened to his tread as he returned to his beat. His measured footsteps passed nearby, then faded. "Long gone, are we?" I muttered when all was quiet. Would that it were so. "You should make your escape, Enola," said my brother softly. "I will be quite all right." Letting me go when he had me so nearly in his clutches? One would think I might feel gratitude for his chivalry, but quite to the contrary. I became annoyed and turned on him. What of that loathsome Baron and his beetle of a son? I think we can safely assume that they have retreated. Sherlock rested his weight upon the stone slab where formerly cheese and butter had been molded. In the darkness I could only just see him. They would not defy the constable, for to do so would be to draw attention to themselves. I snorted, I am afraid, rather like a horse. "That's not what I mean at all. What have they done with the lady? It would seem that the girl you've seen coaching in the landau is a dressed-up stable-boy, the merest blind. Where is Cecily?" During the ensuing pause I wished I could more clearly see his face. He replied slowly, "It would appear that I have been fooled, and have never actually seen the Honourable Cecily Alastair here in London." "I have." "What? When? Where?" "Last week, near the British Museum. Indeed, it was she whom I was endeavouring to follow when I was obliged to kick Mycroft." "You what?" "Our brother laid hold of me, so I booted him in the shins to get away. Did he not tell you?" Evidently not, for Sherlock lapsed into convulsions of laughter. Although nearly silent, he laughed so heartily that he rocked back and forth, grasping at the creamery slab for support. The man seemed on the verge of hysteria. It was quite time for me to get him out of harm's way. As soon as he quieted enough to be sensible, I hoped, I told him, "Come along, we must get you home. If not, straight to Dr. Watson." Sherlock straightened, still chuckling. "I have a cab waiting at the corner of Boar's Head and Oakley." "Ah, very good. I can lead you there by a back way." "A short-cut?" "Yes, by which we are less likely to encounter the constable." "Excellent." He attempted to straighten, grimacing as his weight impinged upon his lame foot. "If you would be so good as to allow me once more to lean upon you, Enola." I stood where I was, trying to study his face, while I had not hesitated to give him physical assistance when he was in immediate danger. I wondered now whether I could trust him. He was so clever, I would not have put it beyond him to slip handcuffs onto me before I knew what he was doing. "Or if you would rather not," he said, correctly interpreting my stillness, "perhaps you could find me something by way of a stick or staff." But when he said that, his voice flattened, some sort of life snuffed out, a butterfly crushed, some sentiment I would not previously have credited, but dared to detect only in its absence. Nor did I dare to give it a name. Yet something fluttered hard and painfully in my heart, and despite all my very sensible misgivings, I walked forward to stand by his side, letting him place his hand on my shoulder. That's the end of chapter 11. It's not a problem. I would help you eat popcorn, Tori. But that's just because I always eat your food. So that's, it's my job. It's what I do. I just eat all your food. Yeah, eat more of it. Yeah, just finish it. Just eat all of it. Eat all the popcorn. Eat it all. Every little bit of it. Or you can take it and throw it in the spider's web out in your yard. You could do that. That would work too. There's nothing explosive about popcorn. Isn't that kind of how you make popcorn? It explodes. Alrighty. The spiders got killed. No! Did you guys kill them? You should not kill them. They eat bugs. They're good. They eat bad bugs like mosquitoes and cockroaches and flies. If you killed those spiders, I'm going to be very sad that you killed them. They were just outside, minding their own business. They weren't hurting anybody. I hope you didn't kill those spiders on purpose. That would make me sad. Okay. Okay, I feel better. Well, he probably did get mad and leave because you messed up. You moved him. You relocated him out of his house. But I mean, I don't blame your dad for moving him because they were like right in front of your trash cans. And that's kind of inconvenient. So, alright. Anyways, enough about spiders. Oh, thanks for clapping, Terror. I cried. Thanks. Okay. Chapter the 12th. Sherlock and I barely spoke until we had passed with all the stealth we could manage through back lanes, kitchen gardens, and a carriage drive where a sleepy old watchdog barked at us, rustling hedges, creaky gates, and at last beneath someone's dark windows to Oakley Street. There we could see the cab, a substantial four-wheeler, waiting at the next corner like a chariot of heaven beneath a halo of gaslight. Hitching along half a step behind me, Sherlock spoke then to answer the question I had not asked. I would be no gentleman if I did not give you my heartfelt thanks, and let you go your merry way, Enola. My heart leapt. But only for tonight. So much for my leaping heart, it plummeted. My brother's caveat was just what I would have expected, yet I had hoped... Never mind. But still my disappointment stung. I responded hotly. Why in heaven's name must you continue to hound me? Can you not see... I quite appreciate your remarkable abilities, my dear sister, but it is my duty to think of your future. How will you ever wed if you continue on your present course? No proper male could ever care for a girl who climbed trees and swung from ropes, he was saying. What of it? I retorted. No one had ever cared for me. What difference if no one ever did? Still, I fear I spoke bitterly. I am quite accustomed to being alone. But surely, Enola, you cannot intend to spend your life as a spinster. This from a confirmed bachelor. The world is a dangerous place. A woman requires a man to protect her. This, as he limped along, leaning more and more heavily on my shoulder. Bosh, I told him. If you say another word to annoy me, I will kick your sore foot. Enola, you wouldn't. You're right, I admitted. Rather, I would aim to lame the other one. Enola! He sounded quite aghast. I think he believed me. No more talk of your so-called duty, I responded. Might I remind you that it is from marriage, the so-called protection of a man, that you are attempting to rescue the hapless Cecily Alistair? And might I ask how you intend to do so? Silence. Can you find out where they are keeping her? In a low tone he answered obliquely. I have been a nincompoop, convinced they have had her in the house, rather than wooing the upstairs maid. Ah, Bridget, no doubt. He grimaced. Precious little information have I got from her. What I should have done was follow the occasional carriage, even if it meant clinging to the back. You cannot do that with your foot. I am quite aware of the condition of my foot. He sounded wrought. Halting, he leaned against me. He leaned against someone's front gate-post so that he faced me. Enola, tell me what you know of this matter, if you would be so good. Quite pleased to spend a few more minutes in his company, but careful not to show it, I retorted. If you will tell me what you know, is Lady Theodora at liberty to contact you? Unhappily so. Due to the strength of her feelings against her husband's arrangements regarding their daughter, Lady Theodora has secretly separated from Sir Eustace, and along with her remaining children she has returned to her family's estate in the country. Once I had learned from him the name and location of this refuge, I gladly told him all about my recent encounter with Cecily Alistair, concealing only its location, the ladies' lavatory. For modesty's sake, and also to safeguard my future patronage there, I called it only a public place, but concerning the unlucky ladies Grandois' escorts, her constrictive clothing, her haggard appearance, and her recognition of me, I spoke fully. I detailed her signaling with her oddly unfashionable fan, the ingenious manner in which she had slipped it to me, and the content of the invisible writing I had found upon its pink paper. Her chaperones were the Viscountess Inglethorpe and the Baroness Merganser, I concluded. You are sure of this? Quite sure. He accepted that I would not tell him how I knew. Then they do have Lady Cecily in their clutches, and in the most desperate straits. Confound it! As if fleeing from his own thoughts, my brother lurched into a limping walk, seizing my shoulder once more for support. I tried to offer hope. But surely there is a limit to the infamy these people are attempting. While they can force her to the altar, surely they cannot at the moment of truth compel her to actually say, I do. You credit the girl with a degree of obstinacy equal to your own, Enola. From the quirk in his voice I could not tell whether he was laughing at me or giving me a sort of backhanded compliment. An attribute most unlikely, he continued, with which you of all people, having once rescued her from a mesmerist, should know. Lady Cecily has shown herself to be susceptible to the strong will of another. She can be dominated. According to Lady Theodora, she has hardly been herself since she was abducted, and indeed shows herself to be a vessel of rather unsteady course. True enough, I muttered, without attempting to explain how the rigors of a right-handed upbringing had forced Cecily to become two different selves. The docile public daughter versus the brilliant, rebellious, reform-minded, left-handed lady, who must not be locked into a prison masquerading as marriage. Sherlock continued, Indeed, such are the accounts I have heard of her, that I fear, were I to locate her and attempt to rescue, she might choose that occasion to scream, taking me for a kidnapper. Nonsense. Ignoring the substance of this remark, I pounced upon its suggestion. You have hopes of finding her, when she could not be any... You have hopes of finding her when she could be anywhere in London? Hope is irrelevant. I must find her, or have her found, even if, as I was saying, she thinks she is being kidnapped. She will think nothing of the sort. Show her this. Reaching into my so-called bosom, actually a repository of numerous supplies, I brought out a pink paper fan fringed with downy pink feathers. From my brother's throat issued a sound somewhat like the midnight call of a corncrake, and his faltering step halted. Is that the one? No, a duplicate. I handed to him this dainty item I had obtained from a caterer on Gillyglade Court. But if she sees you with it, she will know you are her friend. He pocketed it, saying, Thank you, but with a great deal of doubt and not much hope in his tone. I am sure I shall look very sweet carrying it. I rolled my eyes. Have you a better plan? Not yet. Nor do I. We had nearly reached the place where the cab waited. I halted. You can manage from here, I'm sure. I'll go no farther. By shunning the illumination of the street lamp, I hoped to prevent his seeing in full detail my costume or any other aspect of my personage. That was my only thought. I had forgotten my fears that he might attempt to seize me and take me with him in the cab. Oddly, not until he actually let go of my shoulder and stepped away from me did I remember once more to be afraid. He stood so much taller than I. And so handsome, to my eyes at least, with his keen features silhouetted by an aureole. It's like aura, but it's... I'll spell it. I just lost my place. I'm sorry. I put this down and then I just... Sorry, guys. I'm assuming it's like an aura, but... Aureole, which kind of sounds like the bird. Of gaslight, he said, Will you not come along with me, Enola? Have a cup of tea and speak further of this matter? Will you walk into my parlor? Said the spider to the fly. An unjust thought. Sherlock Holmes had given his word, which was inviolate, surely. I could enjoy a few more hours in his company. At the thought my heart seized with a sensation so akin to rapture that I began to understand. My fear was of my own fondness for him. A few more hours in his company and I might find myself too weak to leave. I might, like some fairy tale denizen of the night, be caught by daylight and captured. I spoke almost in terror. Some other time, thank you. There is no other time. The coerced marriage is scheduled to take place 2 days from tomorrow morning. Ye gods! What? I cried, and then a bit more lucidly, where? That's the devil of it, I don't know. Ye reeking gods! Bridget could tell me only that arrangements have been made to use some quite secluded chapel. Ye gods with corns and bunions! Sherlock said, Are you sure you will not come with me, Enola? Minds and emotions all in a tumult, vehemently I shook my head. I need to think, I said. I see. Well, in that case I can only offer you my most sincere thanks for your assistance tonight. He extended his arm, offering me his hand to shake. Or to take hold of me. Did he think I was a fool? Yet I could not insult his feelings by refusing. Our fingers touched, and then his gloved hand surrounded my rather grubby paw, all smirched, even bloodied from climbing. But when I felt his grip begin to linger, I snatched my hand away. My dear skittish sister, he murmured, his tone wry, almost, I dare say, wistful. You remind me of a wild moorland pony. Until we meet again, then, farewell. And he limped away. It's the end of chapter 12. So, I think this is a good place to stop, just looking at the rest of this book. So we're 2/3 of the way through. I think I'm going to go ahead and call it here. I know, I would just be so flattered if somebody called me a pony. So I think I'm going to call it here. Maybe I will be able to pick it back up either tomorrow, excuse me, I'm yawning, either tomorrow, Monday, or Tuesday. I think I will finish The Case of the Peculiar Pink Fan. And then if I am able to get through it kind of early, then earlier in the upcoming week, then I'll go ahead and start on the next book. So thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it. You guys, it's always a pleasure to have you. So I really appreciate you guys just hanging out and listening, just, low-key, no pressure, just hang with me in my weather. So I will hopefully see you within the next couple days. Please take care of yourselves, be safe, have a good weekend, have a good rest of your day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!